Web3 has figured out how to deal with asset ownership, but data remains a question. I'm Marcus, I'm the product manager for Arkiv, and we're trying to fix this. Right now, if you're a builder that needs some sort of structured data to be able to build your dApp, you're faced with the following trilemma. On one side, we have ownership, tamper-proofness, and then queryability. It feels like right now builders are stuck with options that allows them to optimize for two of these three sections. You can have data that is owned and tamper-proof, stored on-chain. However, it's really difficult to access and the developer experience actually sucks. And don't get me started on the cost of it. Or you can have something that is really queryable, then you technically own, but in reality, you're trusting centralized actors that are actually the owners of your data. So, like I said, forced to choose between suboptimal options. However, what if I told you that you don't need to choose actually, because with Arkiv, you can have all three of them. And let me tell you how this works. Arkiv built in a multi-layer architecture. On the top, we have the DB chains, and the DB chains is where the magic actually happens. These are modified blockchains that are specialized for data and that only allow data operations. Everything is indexed, it offers native queryability and programmable aspirations. On the second layer, we have the Arkiv network. This is an L2 that is acting as a coordination as a registry for all the DB chains. And this is where the DB chains are actually settling to. Bottom of it, we have Ethereum, and the Arkiv ecosystem inherits security from Ethereum. So everything ends up settling there. I'm pretty sure that you want to see it in action. So let me hand it over to Severin. Severin's going to show you guys how to build an app using the TypeScript SDK.
Thank you for that. As you can see, Arkiv enables you to build very cool decentralized Web3 apps. And let's get our hands dirty and do exactly that. We'll build this very simple, minimalistic online forum where every wallet can own their own posts, and you can reply to other people's posts. As you can see, when I type a reply, it prompts MetaMask to sign the transaction and send it to the DB chain. And there we go. We will build this using Next.js as our React framework. We'll use RainbowKit to connect to the wallet. And then also I installed Daisy UI to use some pre-made components so we can save time. But of course, in your application, you can do whatever you want. All right, so let's get started. Here I already initialized a new Next.js project with the Connect wallet already set up. And I also wrote all the components for displaying the posts. So in this tutorial, I'm going to mostly focus on interacting with Arkiv as opposed to writing HTML. Okay, so let's get started with the entity schema. In our application, we're going to have two types of entities. One is going to be a post, and the other one is going to be a reply to a post. Now, the biggest difference is that a post is going to have a title and content, and a reply is going to have a post ID, which is a foreign key to a post, and also the content. As you can see, both of these types have an entity key that we're going to be able to see on an Arkiv block explorer. Now, before we get started with data fetching, let's initialize the Arkiv client. So as you can see, we're using this method createPublicClient, which basically takes the chain, in this case Kaolin, which is the testnet of Arkiv, and also the transport. And it gives us a public client that can only read data. Now, the most important part about this file is this project attribute constant. And what is this? Basically, as you can probably remember, Arkiv is a public database, which means every single entity is visible to every single person that wants to read it. So it's kind of difficult to differentiate between entities of my project and entities of your project, which is why I highly recommend you to always set a project attribute on every single entity. In this case, I decided to name it Severin's Arkiv Online Forum because that's my name and that's my project, but you can obviously set it to whatever you want. So now we have everything prepared. We can actually use this client to fetch data from Arkiv. So I prepared this function fetch posts, which is expected to return an array of posts. Now in Arkiv, we can use something called the query builder, which is going to make it so much easier to construct a complex query. Now this query builder, let's start by filtering. Now we can filter by attributes we set on entities. In this case, we're going to have two attributes we need. Number one is going to be the project attribute, which we just talked about. And number 2 is going to be the entity type, because as you can remember, we are making posts and replies as separate entities. Now we are not done yet. Let's also make sure that the response includes the payload of the actual entity, so the title and the content of the post, and also the metadata, because we want to display when will this entity be deleted and also when will it be created. Now with this builder complete, we can add a limit to how many entities it's going to return and fetch the results. Now results are just an object called query results that has the entities and also some cursors if you want to do pagination. And at the end, I just pasted this block of code. We're going to have to parse the results into the shape that our application expects. So we are taking the key. We're also taking the title and content from inside the payload. And we have the expires that metadata. So when I save this file, we should see the posts on the right. And now we can focus on fetching the actual details of a single post. As you can see, we have this fetch post function that takes the ID and returns a post or undefined if it's not found. So first of all, let's wrap this in a try catch to make sure we don't throw. And the Arkiv SDK actually provides a very nice method called getEntity, which does exactly what you think. It takes an entity ID and returns you the value. Now, obviously, the entity needs to be parsed. So let's make sure to do the same parsing as above. We take the key, we take the title and content from inside the payload, and also the expiry and created at from the metadata. And with this, if we open one of the entities, as you can see, it loads on its own page. Okay, so we can move on to fetching the replies to a post. So I prepared this fetch replies function. It takes the post ID and returns the array of replies. And we can start the same way as we did a second ago. So we start a new query builder. We add the project attribute as a filter, and also the entity type. This time it's reply, not post. And here we want to only fetch replies to this post. So we can add a new filter, which is a reply to attribute given the post ID. Now here we also want the attributes because we want to find this ID. We want the payload to get the content, and we also want metadata to know when will this reply be deleted. Let's also set the limit in case there's a lot of replies and fetch the results. Now here, before we return it, let's find the post ID inside the attributes. So here you can just use a find function that's built into JavaScript because attribute is an array. And at the end, we do the exact same parsing. So we take the key, we take the payload, so the inside of the entity, the content, and also the metadata expiry and creation. And we save this file. You can see the reply we made a couple of minutes ago is here. Nice. So reading data works. Now let's work on the hard part, which is actually writing to the blockchain. Here I prepared this function createPost, which is going to take the connector, which is the connection we have to the wallet, either MetaMask or Wallet Connect or whatever, the account address of the currently connected account, and also the post data, so the title and the content. Now, first of all, let's delete these to-dos and get the provider. Now, the types on WAGMI are not exactly very good here, so we need to cast this to the provider ourselves. And after that, we can create the wallet client. Now, a wallet client requires an active wallet that we're going to be interacting with, which is why we cannot use the public wallet we created earlier. Here, we also take the Kaolin testnet. We use this provider that the connected wallet gave us, and we use the address that was passed to us as a parameter. Now that we have the wallet, we can use the createEntity function, and createEntity takes a couple of parameters. So first of all, the actual payload, which is what's going to be inside the entity. Here we can use this nice helper function JSON to payload, which is going to take a JSON object and give us the bytes, because the payload expects a Ewing 8 array. For making things easier, we can actually set the content type like you would on a HTTP response. So here's application JSON. And let's also add attributes. Now, attributes are what we used earlier to query data. So in this case, obviously the project attribute as always, but also let's make sure to mark this as a post, not as a reply. So let's add the key entity type and the value post. The last thing, and maybe the most important thing, is that every single entity on Arkiv has a time to live. And in general, the longer an entity lives, the more expensive it is to create it. But for this demo, let's just set it 30 days. We have this nice expiration time helper from the library that we can use. And of course, let's return the entity key and the transaction hash. So going back to the live demo, let's try connecting the wallet first. As you can see, MetaMask pops up. Okay, we are connected, so let's try making a new post. Let's call it Hello World. This is my awesome post. Okay, MetaMask pops up. And we have the request to create the new entity. Let's hit confirm. Wait a couple of seconds for the DB chain to sync. And here we go. We have our posts. You can actually view it on the Cowlit Explorer. And yeah, this is the data we set earlier. As you can see, this has the entity type post and also my custom project attribute. Okay, last thing we need is the ability to create replies, and it's going to be the exact same thing as before. We have this function, it expects to return an entity key and a transaction hash. So let's get rid of these to-dos, and let's first initialize the wallet client. Exactly the same thing as with creating posts, we need to get a provider, be able to talk to the wallet that's connected to RainbowKit, and then we create our custom wallet client. Again, we use create entity. We get the same payload, application JSON, and for the attributes, now that's the differentiator. Obviously the project attribute, obviously the entity type, in this case it's reply, not post. But let's also tag that this reply responds to a specific post. So let's add a key reply to, and the value is going to be the post ID. Now, of course, a reply also needs to have a time to live. So let's give it again 30 days, that's fine. And let's return the transaction hash and key. Now let's go onto the post we just created. Let's make some response. Awesome, MetaMask pops up. It's going to ask us to confirm the transaction, which is going to write to the DB chain. Let's hit confirm. Let's wait for the chain to give us a confirmation. Hey, and there we go. We can see the response. We'll view it on the block explorer to make sure it's real. And there we go. There's the content. There is the entity type reply. And also we can see the ID of the other post as an attribute. So there we go. I would say this online forum is feature complete. Of course, you can spend a lot more time polishing it, adding more functionality, maybe add a button to delete the post, maybe add a button to edit a post. But I think this is going to be a good enough starting point for 90% of projects. You can find the whole source code on our GitHub page, and I highly encourage you to check out the Discord, the Builders Challenge channel, and also look at our Twitter for news about this challenge.
So you just saw how to build something from zero with Arkiv. Everything that you need is on our docs side at arkiv.network/docs. I invite you to join our community at discord.gg/archive-network and follow us on X at archive-network. Remember, if you're joining our Builders Challenge, the deadline for the submissions is March the 6th, UTC at midnight. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. I hope that you build something fun with Arkiv, and I'll see you in the next one.